Hi, my name is Paula Bernstein. I'm the author of the Hannah Klein Medical Mysteries series, and I'm going to be your moderator for this panel. Just a little bit of housekeeping for our audience. If you want to ask a question, please use the chat function, not the raise your hand function. And Richard, our tech guy, is going to be collecting all of your questions, and then we will ask them at the Q&A toward the end of our panel. So the purpose of this panel is to tell you our secrets about how we engage our readers and keep them turning the pages. And to begin with, instead of my reading long biographies for everyone, I'd like each of you to introduce yourself, tell our audience where you're from, if you have a day job or a special area of expertise that informs your writing. And please tell us about the book that you're going to particularly focus on in this panel. So why don't we start with you, Brad?
Well, hello there. My name is Brad Parks. I am the author of 10 novels, which sort of blows my mind. Yes, Paula just did prepare us, and she said, do you have any special areas of expertise? And I'm glad she asked, because I actually do have a BS from MSU. Which, of course, stands for making stuff up, and I think we all know what the BS stands for. So I have no marketable skills. I have no day job. I just write books. My latest, my 10th novel actually is called Interference. It is, the what if behind it is, what if you could use quantum physics to find a missing person? Next.
Okay, Karen.
Oh, hello. I know we don't know what order we're going to go in.
Oh, okay.
It's not like at actual VoucherCon where you're all in a row. And everybody, I think we all have a different way of seeing each other here. I'm Karen Olson. I've written 3 mystery series. I seem to have a penchant for writing 4 books in each series, so now I have 12 books. My most recent series are the Black Hat thrillers. My latest book is, I'm backwards, Vanished, if you can read in the,
it's only backwards to you, Karen. We see it forward. Don't worry.
We see it perfect.
Okay, good. And I do have a day job. I work at Yale University Press. So in their acquisitions department, nobody send me queries because we only publish scholarly nonfiction. And I am not in charge of any of that. But I do actually, through my job, know how to read my own contracts now, which I didn't know before. And I live in Connecticut.
How about you, Layne?
Hey everybody, I'm Layne Fargo. I'm based in Chicago, and I write feminist psychological thrillers, and I'm also the co-host of the Unlikable Female Characters podcast on LitHub Radio. And I used to have a day job, but I resigned from it on March 13th, 2020, which was an interesting time to do that, but it's turned out okay. So my latest book is They Never Learn, which just came out this past Tuesday. It is about a female serial killer, and it was recently optioned for television with me attached to produce and write the pilot.
Congratulations. That's absolutely terrific. Samantha, how about you?
Hi, I am Samantha Downing. I live in New Orleans. I also do not have a day job. I gave mine up at the end of 2019, so here we are. And I don't have any special expertise other than my twisted brain. And I write thrillers. They're primarily known as domestic thrillers. The first one was My Lovely Wife. It came out in 2019 and was nominated for an Edgar and a McCavity and an ITW award, and that was great. And then my second novel, He Started It, came out over the summer in July, and this is about a group of siblings who have to go on a road trip in order to get their grandfather's inheritance. And go through a lot along the way.
Yeah, I already want to know, what is that woman doing with the shovel on the cover?
Yeah, she's
like, we
got
know
a
what
shovel.
she's doing with the
I hope
shovel,
you can
right?
see that because the cover is so great. It's like a
Yeah.
movie
That's awesome.
poster or something.
You don't want to know.
Layne, I think you should put her on unlikable female characters, except, to be clear, I find nothing unlikable about that.
We would love to have you, Samantha.
Okay, and finally, Susan, tell us about you.
Yeah. I have, I was born in Boston and raised in central New York, but my family is originally from Vermont. And all my stories are either set in rural central New York or in rural Vermont. My first one over here, Short Time to Die, was nominated for Best Debut from Left Coast Crime, and Dread of Winter was nominated for this year's Edgar Award. I also try to put out a reasonable number. I don't consider myself really a short story person, but I try to produce a certain number of short stories and find them very satisfying for a lot of things. I'm currently, after spending a lot of time in New York City as an adult, I moved because of high tech to Silicon Valley, and I loved working in high tech. I no longer have a regular job there, but I love techie stuff, and I try to find little ways to work its way into a lot of what I write. Just before the Edgars were announced, my publisher said that they would not continue with my next contract. So I'm in the process of kind of finishing up a book that I think is kind of exciting, about both identity theft and when you really think you're taking on somebody else's life and it's going to be a piece of cake, only to find out that their parole officer happens to be looking for them, for example. It gets a little complicated. And the setting moves here to Silicon Valley. So it's really kind of fun to be writing something not primarily in central New York, but in Silicon Valley with all these fires going on and a lot of drama in the environment. So I'll be, as I finish this up, it'll be an interesting journey to see where that comes out next. And I do have short stories coming out here and there.
Okay, terrific. So many of the things that keep our readers turning the page include our characters, the sense of place that our novels create, our ability to have our audience feel fear, the secrets that we're hiding and only gradually revealing in the course of our books, and finally, red herrings. I have to tell you, I never understood why the term red herrings was invented. So I finally looked it up, and it turns out it comes from the 1800s, and it refers to a young man who used a red herring, the scent of a red herring, to put off a pack of dogs during a hunt to save a rabbit. So that's where the term comes from. Anyway, let's begin by having each of you tell us about the main character of the book you told me you wanted to focus on in this panel, and what aspects of this character make him or her intriguing or sympathetic to the reader, and how is your character unique? And let's begin with Karen.
Okay. When I started writing Hidden, which is the first in this most recent series, I really didn't know who I was going to be writing about, and my first sentence of the first book came into my head, which is, I've been missing for 15 years. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know why she was missing. I didn't know where she was. I knew nothing about her. And that just sort of launched the entire book and ultimately the series. Her name in the first book is different than her name in the rest of the series because she's a fugitive and she's on the run. She's a computer hacker. which I know nothing about. And I had to do a lot of research into computer hacking, but I don't get very technical in the books because I really don't know anything about it. I just sort of skimmed the surface. But it was kind of fun and scary, the things that I learned. And her name is Nicole in the first book, which is hidden. And she's living on Block Island, which is off the coast of Rhode Island. Because I figured that would be a really, really good place for her to hide because it's very small and not a lot of people know about it. And she lives off the grid. And when the series starts, she has not had a computer for 15 years. So because she's trying to stay away from it because she got into a little bit of trouble, which is why she's on Block Island. And I just, when I started writing, I just sort of let things come out drip by drip as to what exactly happened with her. I don't jump right into it at all.
Okay, so let's move on to Layne. Layne, I love your character, Scarlet, and I'm rooting for her all the way. Tell us about her.
That has been the interesting thing about Scarlet. So as previously mentioned, she is a serial killer. So Dr. Scarlet Clark, she is an English professor by day and by night, and sometimes very early morning, she hunts rapists and other abusers on the college campus where she teaches. And what has been interesting to me about Scarlet is how much people really relate to her, especially women, but sometimes men too. That always really surprises me. But I think it's this element of like wish fulfillment. like we would never kill someone. Hopefully, I don't want to speak for everyone here, but because we're all kind of twisted thriller writers, right? But like we would never do these things, but it's very satisfying to watch someone else do it. And then the other thing about Scarlet is when I started writing this book, I knew I wanted her to be a type A serial killer. So she is extremely organized, like all of her shit is together. She's a professor, so she keeps schedules and lists and everything in her head because she doesn't want to get caught, right? But I think that is appealing, like that competence that she has and how organized she is. I mean, it's something that made her appealing to me and also made me relate to her more than I should probably admit in public.
Okay, Samantha. In your book, you actually have 3 very interesting characters in He Started It, but talk to us about the one that you view as the main and most important character.
Yeah, there are 3 siblings on the trip, and 2 of them have brought spouses with them. So there are 5 people in the car. The only narrator is Beth, and she is the middle child of the siblings. And they're in their 30s now, with the youngest sister being in her 20s. And she has her husband there with her. She has her own agenda, which she tells you about in the first chapter. She doesn't tell you what it is, only that she has one on the trip. And she probably has the most information of all the siblings. She tells the story of their original road trip. The road trip that they're on is a repeat of a trip they went on as children with their grandfather driving. And as a stipulation of his will, they have to go on this trip again and scatter his ashes at the end. And so the book flips back and forth between the first road trip and the second road trip and all the secrets that have yet to be answered and all the grudges that they have against each other, as all siblings do, and all of the scores that they have to settle. So Beth is your window into this world, and she's very quick to tell you when somebody's lying, and she knows, and she'll say, lie, and to you as the reader, but not to that person. Or if somebody tells the truth, she'll tell you, okay, that's true. So she kind of keeps you in the story by breaking the wall, but also keeping you in the car with them, and hopefully.
Okay, and Susan, tell us about Sydney in Dread of Winter, who is obviously your main character and narrator.
Well, actually, I picked Marley from my first book, A Short Time to Die, but I can talk about both of them. Sydney, Marley was modeled. I had a terrible thing happen to me in my freshman year in high school. 2 of my homeroom classmates were murdered. And they came from a small little section that was kind of tacked onto our school district. It was, I mean, to call it working class would be very charitable. It was very working class and hard scrabble. And when these 2 girls disappeared, everyone said, oh, well, they just ran off with boys. And, you know, it was kind of all their fault. You know, they ran off. Well, they didn't run off. They'd been murdered, and a couple of months later, their bodies were found. And their killer has never been positively identified, or killers. And I had always wanted to write a story about the girls who got away. So A Short Time to Die is about the girls that got away. And Sydney, so I had to remake her somewhat. She also comes from, she's part of go to a rather fancy school district school, but their town is the middle of no place. And everyone looks down on them. And so she is, how do I make her resourceful? And how do I turn her fate to be different than the ones of my friends? And yet still have her be a believable 17, 18-year-old kid who has to cope with being chased down by her stepfather and turning the tables on him and his father. And so this is, and the story kind of continues. How do I make sure that she stays real, that she's still a teenager when she's a teenager, and 13 years later, she's an adult who is really trying to become a mature person.
Okay, you did that very well, by the way. That was the one I read.
Yeah, good. I'm glad that's the one you read. I'm very fond of the second one too, but I think it fits the theme of what we're talking about better than the second one.
Okay, and Brad, tell us about your main character and narrative, who is the wife of a physicist at Dartmouth, and who has a unique handicap that I'm sure you researched very carefully.
Oh, for sure. And actually, I've been enjoying hearing about everybody else's characters so much. Like Samantha, I want to go on a road trip with yours. Layne, I want to invite yours over to like reorganize my CDs. Like Susan, does she get the stepdad? Like Karen, like where has she been for 15 years? I want to read all these books now already. So, yeah, the protagonist of Interference, her name is Bridget Bronick. And I have a basic rule for my protagonists, and that's I kind of have to like them. You know, not that they have to be perfect or anything like that, but if I'm going to spend 400 pages, I have to like them. And I was kind of in the midst of brainstorming the book that ultimately became Interference, and we got this new neighbor, and her name is Melissa, and I just liked her, right? She was fun, she was interesting, she was smart, I enjoyed talking with her, she was funny, and she is a librarian with hearing loss. And I was like, huh, librarian with hearing loss. Interesting. So that's how Bridget Bronick became a librarian with hearing loss. I mean, what I was drawn to about it immediately was it was unique. This was not something we see in thrillers a lot, a character who's not well represented. So, of course, I chatted with Melissa, I chatted with her audiologist, I chatted with other people who experience hearing loss and whatnot to, you know, so I could really kind of bring that world to life a little bit. And I think, you know, so you use the phrase handicap, you know, people will talk about disabilities, something like that. What always fascinates me about disabilities, or what we classically call disabilities, is how many of them also come with special abilities that we maybe don't see very well. A favorite example of this is like Down syndrome. I had a cousin with Down syndrome. Do you know that 98% of people with Down syndrome, when asked, are you satisfied with your life, they will say yes? you can find no cohort of people who are that uniformly satisfied with their lives. And isn't that kind of a special ability, like a superpower to have, to be that satisfied with your life? So in the case of somebody with hearing loss, well, they have, different ways of experiencing the world that we don't. One of them, like my neighbor Melissa, taught herself to speech read, or as it's sometimes known, lip reading. And I thought, a character who can read lips, this could end up coming in handy. And of course it does late in Interference, but I'm not going to tell you about that because then I would be ruining stuff. But definitely a wonderful character to bring to life.
Okay. So in all of your novels, the sense of place is very powerful and often very detailed. And I'd like to ask you how the setting works to enhance or complicate your main character's mission, which is either, solving the crime or escaping from danger or getting their inheritance, and ask you why you chose this particular setting. And this time I'd like to start with Layne.
So They Never Learn is set on a college campus, and I chose that setting, and I wanted to make the main character a professor because there are two narrators. There's a professor and a student at the same university, and I knew I didn't want to do like high school, so I thought college, okay. And I made up the school because I didn't think any real universities would want this story taking place on their campus, but I based it on Indiana University of Pennsylvania, which is where I went to school and is indeed a real place. It sounds super fake, but I promise it's real. It's in Indiana, Pennsylvania, which is a small town near Pittsburgh. So I based it on that, and I have already gotten a reader like 2 days after the book came out to contact me on Instagram and was like, is this IUP? Because it sounds like, so I've been caught. But I chose a sort of mid-sized state school because I originally wanted to set it in like one of those charming small like liberal arts colleges, and my agent was like, if you have this school which only has a couple thousand students at most and she's killing people, like she's gonna get caught immediately. You have to have enough people that she can like kill 1 or 2 a year and they're not like missed so much, or they can kind of sweep it under the rug. So I decided to make the school a little bit larger to serve the story in that way. And then also the school is very, as many colleges and universities and large institutions are, is very obsessed with their reputation. So they're willing to sweep a lot of things under the rug, which helps her get away with her crimes.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly on-campus assaults are a big issue and have become even bigger now since the Me Too movement. So certainly your book was very timely, and it was an interesting solution to the problem.
We haven't come up with a better one yet, so that's what Scarlet thinks.
Okay, now Samantha, your characters went on a road trip, so you've got lots of places, some of which sounded quite fascinating and interesting to me, and I assume that they're all real places, that many of which I may never have heard of. So why don't you speak to how you created that road trip and maybe which were some of your favorite places on it?
Yes, the road trip starts in Atlanta and goes across the country. All of the locations they go to are real, and I researched or have been to all of them. I personally have not been to all of them, but I have been to some. So there is, for example, the Bonnie and Clyde Shootout Museum in Louisiana, and the UFO Watchtower in Colorado, which is supposed to be the prime place the energy converges, and this is where UFOs are. So there's a lot of really strange roadside attractions that they go to because this family would not go somewhere normal at all. They wouldn't be hanging out at Niagara Falls or the Grand Canyon. And I did have to map out the whole trip and make sure that they were driving the appropriate amount of time in each segment that they were doing to get to the next place, because they zigzag around. They end up zigzag. It's definitely not a straight line. And whenever they enter a new state, that chapter has the name of the state and the state motto, which turned out to be really interesting. The state mottos across the country can really be leading into a lot of thriller type things, amazingly. And you get to California and the state motto is Eureka. So there you go. But in addition to the road trip itself and that setting, there was also the setting within the car, which is extremely claustrophobic. If you can imagine, this is a 2-week road trip and you are trapped with the same people every day for 2 weeks for hours. And there's even a line in the book, which of course was written before COVID, but one of the characters says, it's like we're quarantined. And so that's how it feels to them, is that they're just stuck and they can't get out. So setting has a lot to do with the telling of this particular story.
Well, I don't know how safe it would be nowadays to stick 5 people in a closed environment of a car, right?
Right.
Even if 2 of them are your Secret Service agents. Anyway, let's not go there. Susan,
Yeah.
you know, I'm a New York native. I was born in New York, went to college in New York, and I have to confess that the whole time I lived there, I never really went upstate very much. You know, other than the Catskills for occasional summer vacations when I was a small child. So I was very interested in your upstate setting. So tell us about it.
Right. You know, it's really very rural. And people think of New York as being New York City, of course, but central New York, and actually most of New York, is very rural. Some of it is extremely primitive rural, like in the Adirondacks. Most of it down around central New York and across the T, Albany to Buffalo, is actually rural in a very farming, agricultural sense. So there are lots of woods and dense trees, but lots of lakes and lots of farms and so forth. So, and there's, even though the mountains are in the Catskills and the Adirondacks, the glaciers carve deep, deep valleys into the terrain. So some of them filled with water, and you have the Finger Lakes. Some of them are just open valleys. So sometimes you're driving down a hill and you swear you're looking at a picture turned up on end right across from you. It's just a lot of steep up and downs, and a lot of really interesting character in the weather too, because it's right on the other side of Lake Ontario from Toronto. And so it just constantly rains and snows and is gray and all this kind of stuff. And I really wanted, a literature professor of mine looked at me after I'd written the first chapter, and I was so proud of myself. And she said, you know, have you ever read Alice Munro? If you read Alice Munro, you know where you are on every single page of whatever she writes. So I went through and really made the environment and the setting a real character, and that character had to appear on every single page of the book. And I changed that, you know, and that continued with the second book, where friends have told me that even in summer they had to roll up in a blanket in order to read the book, because it made them feel so cold. So that's my goal. And there are ways, certainly, the setting could be transformed to slightly different places, but I really wanted that character, this pervasive grayness and oppressiveness of the weather, always gray, always cold, except when it's super hot, always so hard to get around, the steeps up and downs, the little hidden valleys and hidden places. I wanted that to really feel creepy and just part of the whole, part of every scene. So that was my goal, and I think it did pretty well. And then when we moved to California, it becomes rather different in that what makes it kind of California kind of unique around here, for example, is that you can be in the heart of Silicon Valley, and 20 minutes later, you can be in the middle of no place. And so it's sort of a slightly different way of incorporating the environment, which comes into play in the climax of the book.
Susan, did you base your town on a real town that you knew? Because the topography certainly sounded so familiar. I mean, as though you had really walked it, and, you know, you'd really cross-country skied from point A to point B because it was faster than driving. And I
kind of did a mashup. Sharon Springs, her little town, is kind of a mashup of maybe 3 or 4 towns in central New York and one from Vermont. And so it was I'm a very visual, I was an artist, tried to be an artist and had some sort of career as an artist when I was younger. And I'm a very visual writer. So I really need to visualize what it is I'm seeing. And I renamed things so that people wouldn't want to come after me.
Right.
And although I did think Mountain View, California. Once I got to California, I figured all bets are off. It's okay. But for the second book, I actually created a new county with a new town so that I could be as free with, the mayhem as I wanted to be.
Okay. So let's see, Brad. Oh no,
Yeah.
we started with you, didn't
Yes,
we?
we have a setting in my book. So Susan, I was thinking like Mountain View, California. What if you had a massive multinational corporation that was like intimately tied into everyone's lives, set in Mountain View, California? It could never happen.
Yeah,
Forget
no,
it.
it could never. But you would have your choice of 4 or 5 of them anyway.
Right. So much like Layne, I used my alma mater as a setting, Dartmouth College. Unlike Layne, I just called it Dartmouth College. I honestly, I knew I wanted to set it at a university. Dartmouth calls itself a college, but it's really a university. And frankly, this is a book that delves deep into quantum physics, and I had done so much research for the quantum physics already. I didn't feel like doing any more research. So I just wanted to set it at a place that I knew, and I figured, Dartmouth. Even if I say bad things about it, they're not going to sue me. Well, come on, I'm an alum. I won't give them money if they sue me. So it'll all work out fine. So yeah, I think sense of place is one of the reasons we all read mysteries. Let's face it. So I think it's important. Anywhere I've ever set a book, I have always gone there. Like the book before this was set in a prison. It's called The Last Act, and I actually went to a federal prison in West Virginia, and I used that prison as where I set it. I just think that when you can really bring something completely real to life for people, it's really gratifying, and it's a big reason we read mysteries.
Yeah. Karen, you already mentioned that your novel is set on Block Island, and I was very impressed with the great detail. Have you spent a lot of time there? Did you kind of work out all the stuff for your novel there, or did you just look at a map and virtual tours? What did you do?
I was actually a travel editor in another life. And I was a travel editor for the New Haven Register for about 10 years. And so I did a lot of little press trips places. And my husband and I actually spent our honeymoon in Block Island. And then I did a press trip there when I was the travel editor. And so I've only been there twice, but I decided that would be a really great place to put a book, because it's an amazing island. It's small. The minute you step ashore off the ferry, you just feel like all your troubles are gone and you're just relaxed, which is sort of a real contradiction with my character, who is trying not to be found. So she's always tense on this island that is so lovely and relaxed. Each one of the books in the series is actually set in a different place. The second book is actually set on a small island in the middle of the St. Lawrence River up in Quebec. The third book is set in, which I have been to a couple of times. The third book is set in Miami. The last time I was in Miami was in 1984. I lived there for 2 years after college, and I haven't been back since. And so I did a lot of Google searching for things. And then the fourth book is set in Charleston and Paris, 2 of my favorite places. So, and I really did bring in a lot of my travel writing experience into describing the places that I'm writing about. And I will just say to Layne, I actually, in my very first book, killed off a Yale student, which I don't know that I could get away with now since I work for Yale at this point. They might not like that very much, but it was a lot of fun.
Okay, let's deal with another topic. every single one of your books, and several of them are thrillers rather than traditional mysteries, have a significant element of fear. So tell us a little bit about how you make the reader fear for your characters and how you build the suspense. And I'm going to start with Samantha.
I think in my books, there isn't a traditional hero and villain type of character. They're all just the lesser of evil. So you kind of have to pick and choose who you may or may not want to root for. I don't care at all if my characters are likable or unlikable. I don't even think about it when I'm writing them. I just want to make them compelling. So someone whose story you want to follow, and maybe there's something you have in common with them that has nothing to do with killing. Maybe there is in this situation, the sibling situation, you can relate to sibling rivalry. I certainly can in my life. This is just sibling rivalry taken to the extreme. So whether or not, I think from the beginning, bad things are going to happen. And this is where the fear comes in. In that car of 5 people, they will not all be alive at the end. I guarantee you this, and this probably from page 1, because I think on page 1, Beth says, when the shooting starts, she goes first. So from the beginning, bad things are going to happen. And I think that fear can be escalated through the expansion of the story. When the story starts to unfold and you start to see the reasons for all their rivalries and what happened on the first trip and what the real point of the road trip is, the story gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Okay, Susan, how about poor Sydney? How do we fear for her?
Yeah, really. My first book, I wrote so much by instinct. I really wish in some ways I could write that way again. I just wrote it and I didn't even know what I was doing. I thought I invented all kinds of stuff, oh, look what I did there, and then find out this is like a really common way of dealing with all kinds of stuff. I think what I did right away was to set the tone by the nature of the weather and the setting, that it's very tense and very almost claustrophobic. And then right in the first chapter, there's no mystery. She's attacked by her stepfather and his father for reasons she's not entirely clear about, except that they happen to run all the local crime in that area, and she knows that other people have disappeared, and so she has to take them seriously. And she, by just kind of fumbling her way around, turns the table on them, and they end up dead, which is where A Short Time to Die comes from. Within 20 minutes of their first altercation, they're dead, and she's still alive. And yet that they are deeply connected people in the community. There are people in their families who will come to get her. There is no escape. She can't go to the cops because she's part of this family. She can't go to her mother. She can't go to anyone. She is trapped. And so the story just evolves, building layers on that. Because it's a thriller, it's not a mystery. You're sort of exploring that world of, like a mouse in a trap, and where do you get out, and where is their respite, and showing how brave she is despite all that, just willing to tackle things and make her break and things like that. And it was enormously much fun. For people who are still writing their first book, I would say take all the time in the world you want to write it. There's never so much fun as no one else cares about it except you. And so make it what you really enjoy and what you want. And when I go back and read it, I still find that aspect of it so, I wish I could recapture so many times over. And so for myself, how you feel about that. So that was that building that tension and just crunching down further and further, and she's pushing out. It was a lot of fun.
Isn't that 10 books in? And I feel like sometimes people still don't care about my books. So I don't even know what you're talking about. So anyway,
yeah, that's not true. I really cared whether your physicist, Matt Bronick, who disappears, I was really worried about what happens to him. So why don't you talk about that a little?
Sure. So sorry, I didn't mean to be like hijacking the panel to make me the next person asking a question, but I guess that was a good segue. It looks like we know what we're doing at this point. So, you know, whether it's with Matt Bronick, my physicist, or I mean, really any of my characters, I am a big believer in what I call the anti-Hippocratic oath. So if the Hippocratic oath is do no harm, doctors take it. The anti-Hippocratic oath is do lots of harm. So you know, and I don't plot out my books ahead of time, so I really don't know exactly how the journey is going to go. I might have an idea of how it ends. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But as I'm going along, it's like when I suddenly realize, oh my gosh, if this character did this, they could get thrown in jail. I can throw them in jail now. And I feel awful about it, because going back to what I said before, like I like my characters, I really do, and I still do terrible things to them, and I sometimes I feel this like guilt. But then I lie down and the feeling goes away. So it's all right. But yeah, I think that the goal is to make things as difficult as possible as you can for your characters. I mean, if we're talking about stoking fear in the reader, right? Like you make things as hard as you possibly can, and have the reader constantly thinking like, okay, how are they going to get out of this? And really make that answer as unapparent as possible. I think that's the trick.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Karen, certainly your character, even though she did commit a rather large white-collar crime back in the day, is someone we kind of like, and you've made us afraid that some bad things are going to happen. So I want to talk about that a little.
I think one of the things that I learned in writing this whole series is that everyone should be frightened of the internet. And that sort of became sort of a theme throughout. Since she is a computer hacker, as I did my research, I discovered a lot of things about the internet that scared the daylights out of me. So I figured I would pass that along to the reader and make them afraid. I mean, just like if you go and pump your gas, there could be a skimmer on the little place where you put your credit card in. And just by paying for your gas at the pump, you could be giving all of your information to some unknown person. I no longer pay at the pump. I go inside because it terrified me. You know, I did a lot of research into the dark web and all of the creepy things that can happen there. So I took a lot of that and wanted to pass it along to the reader, because there really is no other scarier place than the internet, actually. And the fact that we have absolutely no privacy whatsoever at all. And, you know, if you do a Google search, all of a sudden, you know, you're on Facebook and you have ads for the things that you did a Google search for.
I know.
You know, everybody knows everything about you, and it's frightening. And so that is a lot of what I wanted to bring into the books.
And you did, absolutely. Layne, your turn.
Well, in my book, I want people to be afraid for Scarlet, you know, because the police are closing in and she might get caught. And I mean, she's the protagonist, right? We're in her head and we're afraid something is going to happen to her, but she's also terrifying. Like, I want people to be afraid of her too. I mean, especially if you're a man who's done something you shouldn't have, you should be very scared of Scarlet. But just in general, like the first chapter is her killing a person in cold blood and just like remorselessly watching him die. Like she's a scary person. And I love hearing from readers that they have gotten so in her head and caught up in the story that they are rooting for her. Like they don't want her to get caught. They want her to get away from the police and the investigation that's going on and continue to commit these crimes. And then they'll kind of stop and go, wait a second, like I shouldn't be rooting for the murderer, like this is wrong. But that's my hope with the book, is that people kind of are afraid of her, but also fear for her in the situation she gets herself into and get really caught up in it, and want her to succeed sort of in spite of their own moral character.
Yeah, that's really true. Okay, so another aspect of how we keep our readers turning the pages is the fact that everyone has secrets, and some people will go to great lengths to hide their secrets. So give some examples without going so far as to make them spoilers of secrets, the kinds of secrets that you use in your books. And I think, Susan, why don't you start there?
Yeah, this might be jumping the gun a little bit in terms of maybe a question you want to ask in the future. But basically, I wrote the whole book from the viewpoint of Marley and realized something was not working. Mm-hmm. For one thing, she was turning into a Mary Sue, for those of you who would know what a Mary Sue is, from the old Star Trek thing. I mean, she speaks 50 different languages, and she, can fly upside down and backwards, and, it goes on and on. She was just too perfect. She was solving all of her own problems, basically. So I separately wrote a narration as a police procedural type of thing with a detective in Silicon Valley, Vanessa Alba. 2 bodies are found in the mountains, the Santa Cruz Mountains up there in back of us. And she and her partner trace down the bones to Central New York. And they go to Central New York to figure out who these people are. And what I loved about writing this, and I thought I invented this, by the way, this is another thing I thought I invented, where Marley continues to tell her story, and there are things that she does and says that Vanessa will never know. And Vanessa, in investigating who these people were and how they ended up coming from Central New York to be killed or die at least it was obvious it was a homicide in California, she finds out things that Marley never knows. So they have secrets from one another, and yet it's only the reader who has the full story. And I loved that I could have these really empowering the reader to have a much better sense of the full story than either one of my characters. And it allowed me to bury all kinds of little details and interesting things that would never come out, including a few dangling deaths, I guess I would say, as to who did the dirty deeds. Not even the reader knows, because not even the writer knows exactly what happened. So that was how I kind of solved that problem. And I invented it, of course. Not really.
Okay, actually, I've gotten my warning from Richard that we only have, another 15 minutes to go. So I'm going to take a few questions from the audience, and just if they may not be for all panelists, some of them are very, specific. So first question, this is for Layne and Brad. Will you ever write a series, Layne, or are you done with series? Brad?
Layne, go first.
So I always said no, that I would never write a series. My first book, Temper, I basically ruin every character's life, and then I'm just like, bye. Like, there's really no way to have a sequel to that. And I thought for They Never Learn that it would definitely be a standalone. But then actually when we sold the TV rights, they were interested in if it could continue beyond one season, and they wanted me to come up with some possibilities for what could happen after They Never Learn ends. And I started brainstorming, and then I was like, oh no, I have ideas for 2 or 3 more books. What do I do? So I don't know if I'll end up writing sequels, or if the TV show actually goes forward, if it'll be multiple seasons. I mean, it's all up in the air, but I have ideas.
Layne, I actually have ideas for you, because there is some astonishing percentage of college campuses that report 0 sexual assaults a year. I forget what that stat is. It's 90%. It's batty.
It's a lot.
So you just unleash Scarlet on each one of those campuses. I mean, they'll keep her busy forever. It's all good.
That's her plan. That's her plan. She would love that.
So anyway, but Oline, so actually, given that it's political season, Oline, I should probably just like make that my answer and then have a fly land on my head and then smile and then move on. And that'll be, me dodging the question. But I actually would. So my series character, for those who don't know, is Carter Ross. He's an investigative newspaper reporter. I have not given up on him. It just kind of hasn't happened within the publishing cycle that I get back to him. I'd love to get back to him someday. Right now I've been noticing, and this is, Oline's a journalist, so I'm kind of giving you more the answer that journalists might be interested in. I've really been noticing that publishers are more interested in standalones right now. I think that pendulum kind of swings back and forth depending on what's going on. I think maybe because we're in such a like holy shit moment, right? That like all they can think about is marketing and selling one book versus a series is like a multi-book commitment. And they're like, well, we don't know, by the time book 5 in this series comes out, we don't know what's going on in the world. So you can just write one and we'll sell that one and we'll worry about that right now. So my focus has been on standalones lately, but hopefully Carter will get to come back someday.
Yeah. Layne, I have actually 2 combined questions for you. I'll give them both to you. One was having the readers root for the killer part of the early plan, or did that develop? And if the latter, how did you bring that out more? And the other question was, what features do you think need to be present for readers to love a villain?
I answered the first one a little bit in chat, but I'll repeat. I definitely intended for people to root for Scarlet. I always hoped that I didn't want her to be a character that people hate and they're hoping for her to get caught. I wanted them to be there along with her and kind of justifying her crimes to themselves as well. And then for readers to love a villain, this is a hard one for me because I just love villains always. Like those are the characters I gravitate towards. So I don't know what that says about me, but for Scarlet specifically, I think her competence, like her organization skills is one thing. And then also she has this very dark sense of humor that I think a lot of people respond to. So those are some things about her specifically. But I think there just has to be something for us to latch onto where we can understand the character and why they're doing what they're doing, or find them appealing, even if we wouldn't want to, hang out with them necessarily.
So I have a couple of individual questions for some of you. So Karen, you labeled your series the Black Hat Thrillers, and I was wondering how you chose that title and how it relates to your books, because I couldn't figure it out when I read the first one.
Well, a black hat is actually a criminal who deals with the internet. There's black hats, and then there's white hats, and those are the good computer people. And then there's gray hats, which sort of straddle the two. When I wrote the first book, they were trying to come up with a series title, and I came up with the Black Hat Thrillers, and the publisher said, oh no, because there was a really, really, really bad movie out at the time called Black Hat, and he thought that for some reason we would be influenced by that. So it didn't become the Black Hat Thrillers until like the third book, which was sort of too bad, because it really did encompass it, and nobody ever saw the movie Black Hat. So it doesn't really matter because it was just so bad.
Oh, okay. Well, that's an education for me, because I didn't know that term related to, bad hackers. Brad, I loved your book for a variety of reasons. Back in the day when I was a Caltech graduate student, not only did I do a thesis that involved some theoretical quantum mechanics, but I scored not just a PhD, but a very nice theoretical physicist husband. So I could really relate to your novel. And since you're not a physicist, I'm a little curious. You did a great job, I thought, at explaining very complicated scientific concepts to a reader who might not know anything about science. And I'm wondering how you researched that and, you know, if you kind of had somebody reading those scenes and telling you where you needed to tone it down, and
yeah, so I mean, thank you.
difficult.
First of all, Paula, thank you. And you're also giving me some ideas for the marketing department. It's like, okay, find more people who have theoretical physicists for husbands, because clearly that is the market for this book. But, you know, I think my secret on the physics is that I'm not that smart. And that's not false modesty, by the way. So your husband's a theoretical physicist. My wife is a school psychologist. They give intelligence testing. You know, that's kind of what they do. And so when she was in grad school, when I say I was her test dummy, I mean, literally, I was her test dummy. She would give me these tests that were like for 6th graders, and I would fail them miserably. So like, I know I'm not that smart. And given that I'm not that smart, I just have to explain the physics for someone who is as dumb as I am. And as long as I kind of keep in touch with my inner stupid, I know I'm going to be fine. So that was always my goal. Just explain the physics in a way that I get it. And then I figure everybody else will get it too.
And who explained it to you? Did you have a physicist consultant that you,
Yeah, I had well, to call him an unwitting consultant, you know, the world's a funny place, Paul. Like, we end up with friends, we don't know why. So one of my friends from college, he was in my a cappella group with me, went on to get a double PhD from Harvard in physics and the history of physics. And he is now a professor of physics at MIT. You know, this book deals with quantum entanglement, as you know, and now I guess the rest of you know as well, which is this really weird thing. Dave Kaiser is the name of my buddy. Dave was actually on the team of physicists that closed kind of one of the last loopholes of proving that quantum entanglement actually exists. So Dave was like constantly getting quoted in the New York Times about his work and things like that. So every time he would get quoted in the New York Times, I would just kind of call him up and harass him and whatever. But then I was kind of having, you know, a typical brainstorming time, and I went, ooh, quantum entanglement. What if we used quantum entanglement to find a missing person? And then I called up Dave and started talking to him about it. So that was, yeah. And then Dave was actually kind enough to read a copy of the book and kind of, you know, give me some notes on it and whatnot. So, you know, every now and then when I see the 1-star review that says, well, this author doesn't understand the science at all, I want to be like, yeah, we'll talk to the MIT physicist who I ran this by, okay?
Yeah, no, I thought you did a really great job
Thanks.
with that. So, Susan, in the little town that you chose as your setting in Dread of Winter, there was a huge opiate problem. Is that in fact really true in Central New York? Is it a huge issue there?
Put myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, very much so. And I think you can see this not just in Central New York, but really it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And particularly in parts of the country where there is no growth industry aside from drugs. You know, people live in these wonderful, beautiful settings, but have no careers. Often they just piece together livings. So you only need so many school teachers. You have a couple of shopkeepers. You have one doctor. You have a dentist. And what does everybody else do? Plow driveways for a living, do carpentry here and there. I mean, they're all just making ends meet by putting all these things together. And drugs have, starting in the, you know, when the opiates started coming in, just became this huge escape valve, and also a way for people to die very quickly and very sadly. And it's all of us. So I interviewed people, even in my own family, who had been addicts, and talked to. I interviewed people in law enforcement. I went to Central New York and visited the Madison County Sheriff's Department and talked to them about their drug problems and how they were working with that and solving it. And actually, it was very interesting, and it made its way into the book, which is when it got to the point where people would see an obituary and no cause of death was listed, they just assumed it was drugs, a drug overdose. And, you know, it's very easy to demonize these people. I really wanted to these are our friends, these are our family, these are people we really love, and they're stuck. And it's, I really wanted to make that tragedy part of the story.
Okay, Layne, your character Scarlet, who has her secret life as a vigilante serial killer, what in her psychological makeup allows her to do that? And do you think privately that taking the law into your own hands, as your character does, is ever the best option, or perhaps the only option?
I mean, she's a sociopath.
Okay.
There's been some confusion about this. I feel like some people don't want to see her as sociopathy, or I actually find it interesting that people keep calling her a vigilante, because I don't think of her that way at all. I just think of her as a serial killer who enjoys killing bad men. Like, it's just what makes her happy. So, yeah, I mean, she has a past certainly that has like led her to this. I don't want to give any spoilers on that score, but she just has a lot of rage and frustration at what she perceives as unfairness in the world, and like things that are done to women. And I think we can all relate to that at this moment in time. And I wouldn't say, it's not right to take the law into your own hands, but sometimes it is. Like, what is the option? I mean, we see over and over, like Brad was saying, these campuses that report 0 sexual assaults when there are obviously many sexual assaults happening. It's like, what are you supposed to do if the powers that be aren't doing anything, if the justice system isn't doing anything? Like, maybe you shouldn't kill people, but I don't know. Like, what's the other option if it's not working, if the system's not working? So that's where Scarlet comes from.
Richard tells me that it's time to stop, which is really a shame because I was enjoying the conversation so much. Thank all of you for a terrific panel, and all of your books were so much fun for me to read and get to know. And I hope we can all do this again next year.
Well, I hope everyone can buy books through independent bookstores right now, because they really need our support.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree with that. Okay, so I guess we're supposed to sign out
Bye,
now.
everyone.
Okay.